Welcome back to another episode of Web Dev Speak. Now this week we're going to dive right back into our SEO 102 and how to improve our on-page SEO. Now if you remember in last week's episode, we learned how important it is to optimize your images for SEO, how to create SEO-friendly URLs, creating internal links throughout your website, and adding meta titles and descriptions. So let's go ahead and dive right back into the next few things that are imperative to setting up your website for SEO success. Now, Google cares that your site is secure and you're protecting your customers' information. A way to do that is to use and install an SSL certificate. Sometimes we call it a security certificate. You may even notice now that Google will show you in their Chrome browser that a website isn't secure. Now, that takes away trust with your browsers, and that's the last thing you want. You want to ensure your customers that you're doing what you can to protect their data. A lot of this is just really Google trying to enforce us to follow best practices. You can buy your SSL certificate through your hosting company, and they can install it on your website for you and get it all connected and going. Or you can purchase one through a third-party service or even get a free certificate through a couple services and install those yourself. Now, I'm going to warn you, installing an SSL certificate, if you've done it a few times, is a really simple, quick process. But it does have the potential to take your website down if you don't activate it at all correctly. So, if you have a website right now, I'd highly recommend reaching out to your hosting provider or your developer and have them take a look at it and get that SSL installed. Once you have an SSL active and ready to use, you also have to force your website to serve that version of the website, the HTTPS, instead of the HTTP. And I know this is really technical. Now, you really only want people to access the site through that secure HTTPS version. The nice thing is with WordPress, there is a great plugin out there that can force that redirect for you and will automatically load the HTTPS version of your website. Let's take a quick look at what that looks like here. Now, I have my learning website set up. I already have an SSL certificate installed in my server. Now, I just need to force it to use that. I can install a free plugin called Really Simple SSL. What else if I type that correctly? All I have to do is get this installed, activate it, and then it's going to tell me here, make sure everything is ready to go, and I'm going to go ahead and activate that SSL. Now, this may log me out of my website, as you can see here. It definitely logged me out of my website, but I'm going to show you here. You'll now see I'm on a secure HTTPS version of the site instead of that HTTP. Google has been warning us for a while that not having an SSL certificate installed on your website and using it would affect your rankings. But what I think is most imperative here is the fact that they tell your searchers that your site isn't secure. Trust is so hard to gain, and the last thing you want to do is lose that trust at any point of the buying process. It's 100% worth the investment to have an SSL installed on your website. Okay, now that you have your SSL certificate up and running, you need to make sure that Google is tracking the right version of your website. Now, while you really only have one version, there's not two things out there that you need to edit and worry about. Google looks at it as two separate versions. So you want to make sure that they're indexing the right one, and that gives you the SEO points of having the SSL certificate. So the first thing you need to do is if you have Google Analytics installed on your website currently, you need to come into your account and adjust your main domain. If you click on this admin section here and then property settings, all you have to do is adjust this drop down from HTTP to HTTPS. Then you scroll down here and you click Save. However, you want to go into Google Search Console next, and that's a little bit trickier. This is also called webmasters.google.com if you use the old version. You want to check what it's viewing on your website. Now, you can see here, I already have the HTTPS installed for this client, and I have a few others in here. But if I know I have an old version, an HTTP version set up, and a lot of times you're going to, if you have an older website, you're not going to have what's called domain verification. So we're going to come in here and click Add Property. And in this case, I'm going to hit URL prefix. This domain property requires a different set of verification. You don't have to do anything if that's what you have, but you probably have the URL prefix. So if you come in here, you want to make sure that you add the HTTPS version of your URL. And then you would just hit continue there. Google Webmaster Tools is going to make you verify that you own that domain. If you have that domain set up in Google Analytics and your analytics tracker on your website, you're good to go. It's going to automatically check that and see that that's there. They will give you a list, if you don't, of automatic options that it might detect for you, or it's going to give you some other options to go through. Okay, that's technical stuff over. And I get that that's really technical, but we're going to dive into something now that's a lot less technical and a little bit more fun. Now, a few years ago, in the dark ages of SEO, shall we say, we wanted to have as many instances of our main keywords on our pages as possible. Some people even made those words white text on white backgrounds to get as many of them in as they could. The stories I could tell you of SEO circa 2010 and before. Now, though, we really want to just focus on providing high quality content that answers our clients' questions. I know about you guys, this is way more fun for me as a copywriter to write. So that brings us to our next tip, and that means including descriptive keywords and key phrases in our headlines. Your headlines are there to break up pieces of content on each of your website's pages, and they're a great place to put those keywords in. These days, you really only want to use the keywords when they make sense for the copy, so keep that in mind. But introducing those sections with the targeted keywords tells Google, hey, this bit right here, it's about this. Headlines in the code are denoted in what we call heading tags, and they start with an H1 down to an H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. Think of these heading tags like a college term paper. Don't go have a PTSD, episode there. Now, I'm going to combine this one with our next tip, which is only having one H1 per page. That's because the H1 is the title of your page. It's the main idea. If your web page is a term paper, you can only have one title for that paper. Google gets confused when it sees more than one H1 on the page and no longer knows what the main point is. Now you can see this is my largest headline and it is my main headline. This is my H1. It's the main point of my business and what I do. Now as you scroll down, you can see a smaller headline over my funnels. This is my H2. And below these are H3s. So each of these denotes a subsection of this section. Each of these headlines have not only keywords that I want to be found for, but also focus on the benefit I provide my clients. Now, if I were to look at the code, we just inspect element here, a little trick for you. You can see this H2 tag. Very straightforward. It's not a difficult code. And you can see my H1 here. Not a difficult code to write. All you really need is that H1, H2, whatever. Now, an important thing to do is to look for only one H1 on your page. To do this, you can view page source. And then you can search, Control F, and then I'm going to open bracket. I'm going to look for a specific H1 tag. And here you can see that I only have one search result, which is good. I only want to see one search result for an H1 on each page. The unfortunate reality, there's a lot of WordPress themes out there that I know are set up to include more than H1 tag on each page. It's a really bad practice, but it does exist. Some of those themes, you're able to change which heading style you use, particularly in the page builders, as I've seen. So just make sure that when you're selecting a heading style, when you're adding a new heading, that you don't add a bunch of H1s on your page. Instead, think of it this way. Your H2 tag should introduce a section. H3, H4, H5, H6, should nest under that and be subsections of that H2. This is another one that can be a little bit time consuming to check and fix, but it's also a place I recommend hiring a developer to help you figure out your individual theme if it's not very straightforward. Now, you guys are all excited for the last tip of our on-page SEO improvements, aren't you? Because it's always my client's least favorite recommendation: blogging. Blogging helps us not only build up that high quality content, focusing on one of our many keywords and key phrases, but it also helps with Google's freshness factor. Now think about it. Google cares that it's serving relevant search results. Now, the last thing I'm looking for, especially in the digital marketing space, is an article from 2015. That can be wildly out of date for me. Now, while your industry may not change that often, Google looks at how often a website is updated as a way to show it's serving relevant, active, fresh content. We call this the freshness factor. And simply put, blogging is one of the easiest and most effective ways to contribute to that. When it comes to blogging, there's not really a magic number of blogs that you need to write. I tell most of my clients to blog on a schedule. If you choose once a month, pick the day of the week, like the first Wednesday of the month, and keep that consistent. You can blog multiple times a month, week. You can even blog daily if that's what you want to do, but try to stay on a consistent schedule. Your readers will get used to that and go looking for your content when they find it relevant to their needs. Another great place to start with your blogging is breaking down those frequently asked questions that you get all the time. Turn those into short articles. I recommend at least 400 to 600 words for a blog article. And while for some of you that may sound like a lot, I actually struggle to keep mine below 1,000. Once you get going and once you get in the groove, it is a whole lot easier. There is so much more to SEO, but if you take the steps in this video and last week's, you'll have a website that's ready for some of those more intricate external strategies. Plus, you'll be surprised at how much different some of these tweaks can make to your SEO performance without anything external running too. See y'all next week.